She was supposed to be buried with her secrets, but she crawled out of the ashes wearing a crown. The Mafia king made her his equal. Now she's ready to make her family beg. The only question left is, who dies first? Dad's coming home tonight. Vivian said it out loud, like saying it might make it real. The rain outside pressed against the tall windows of the green estate. Soft and steady, the house felt alive again. Flowers on the table, a roast in the oven, candles lit the way her father liked. She straightened the family photo on the mantle, the one from their last Christmas together before his work took him overseas. Her heart beat faster with every tick of the clock. 3 years, she thought. 3 years since I've seen him. Tonight, everything changes. A car pulled up the driveway. Tires crunched on gravel. Vivian smiled, rushing to the door. It wasn't him. 2 officers stood on the porch, hats in their hands, faces carved in pity. Miss Green. Yes. The older one cleared his throat. There's no easy way to say this. Your father's car lost control on the highway. It went off the bridge. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The world blurred. The words sounded muffled, like they were underwater. No. No. You must be mistaken. I'm sorry, miss. We tried to reach him. Her stepmother, Catherine, appeared in the doorway behind her, already dabbing at fake tears with a silk handkerchief. Oh, dear Lord. My poor husband. Beside her, Olivia clutched her mother's arm, lower lip trembling with perfect performance. The officers offered their condolences and left. The door clicked shut. Silence. Vivian stared at the wood grain of the door until the edges of her vision went dark. Then Catherine's voice cut through, smooth as poison. Well, she sighed, tossing the handkerchief aside. I suppose that's that. Vivian turned slowly. What do you mean, that's that? He's dead. Yes, Catherine said, swirling her wine. Which means I'm in charge now. Vivian blinked, the grief boiling into confusion. In charge of what? Everything, darling. The company, the estate, the accounts. You see, while your father adored you, he wasn't very practical when it came to paperwork. Catherine reached into her bag and slid a document onto the table. The will. Vivian's breath caught. He signed it. I saw him sign it before he left. Oh. Catherine held up the pages. The bottom corner was torn. Looks like he didn't get it notarized. What a shame. Olivia snickered from the stairs. Guess that makes us the rightful Greens now. You can't do this, Vivian said, voice trembling. This is my home. Catherine corrected, taking a lazy sip of wine. Now it's mine. And as for you, she gestured to the guards by the door. Get her out. Vivian stumbled back. Catherine, please. Just let me stay the night. I'll leave in the morning. Catherine's lips curled into a smirk. I've waited too long for this. Out. Now. Before we begin, click subscribe. Like this video, and tell me where you're watching from. I hope this story makes you believe that you can fight for your dreams and win. The guard stepped forward. Vivian's heart hammered. You're monsters, she whispered. Catherine tilted her head, mock sympathy shining in her eyes. And you, dear, are a problem that's finally solved. They dragged her out into the storm. The door slammed. The house that once smelled like her father's cologne. The hallways that held her laughter, gone. The rain hit like needles. Vivian stumbled down the street, suitcase banging against her leg, her hair plastered to her face. The estate's lights faded behind her until all that was left was the sound of thunder and her own uneven breathing. Where am I supposed to go now? She muttered. Where do I even start? Her phone buzzed, battery warning. Empty. Useless. Her shoes squelched against the pavement as she wandered deeper into the city, where streetlights flickered and alleys breathed danger. A car slowed beside her. A voice called out. Hey, pretty thing. Need a ride? Vivian ignored it, clutching her coat tighter. The engine revved and rolled closer. Don't be shy, another man's voice said. Laughter followed, low, hungry. Leave me alone, Vivian snapped, speeding up. A hand grabbed her wrist. Come on, sweetheart. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Panic burst in her chest. She yanked, kicked, screamed, but another hand closed over her mouth, pulling her into the shadows of a narrow alley. The smell of smoke, rain, and liquor filled her lungs. She struggled, nails clawing at his arm. Please, let me go. A gun cocked behind them. Touch her. A voice said, deep and cold, and die. The men froze. From the mouth of the alley stepped a man in a dark coat, soaked but composed, eyes sharp as glass. The metallic click of his pistol echoed against the walls. "Who the hell are you?" One of the thugs spat. The stranger didn't answer. He pulled the trigger once. The first man dropped. The second bolted. The stranger turned his gun slightly, another shot splitting the night. Silence followed. Vivian collapsed against the wall, gasping. Rain mingled with the tears she hadn't realized were falling. The man holstered his weapon and stepped closer. The flicker of a nearby car fire cast his face in light, chiseled, controlled, terrifyingly calm. He knelt beside her. "You hurt?" She shook her head, too stunned to speak. "Can you stand?" he asked. Who are you?" He glanced toward the burning wreck at the end of the street. Flames licked at the metal, painting the alley in orange and gold. "Damien Russo," he said quietly. "You shouldn't be here." Her lips parted. The name was a legend whispered in city corners. The Mafia King. The man mothers warned their sons about. "You killed them," she murmured. "They were going to hurt you," he said simply. "I don't tolerate trash." Vivian swayed. Her vision blurred. "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why do you look like you've seen this before?" Her knees buckled. Damien caught her before she hit the ground. She felt the weight of his arms, strong, steady, frighteningly gentle. Somewhere in the haze, she heard him mutter something in Italian before his voice faded into the rain. As the fire roared behind them, he carried her toward the waiting car. And for the first time since her father's death, Vivian felt something new stirring in her chest. Fear, grief, and the faint, dangerous spark of destiny. When Vivian woke, the world was too quiet. The ceiling above her was white marble veined with gold. A chandelier suspended like frozen lightning. She blinked, her head pounding. The sheets beneath her were silk, too soft, too foreign. The air carried a faint scent of gun oil and expensive cologne. She sat up slowly. Her body ached. The last thing she remembered was rain, blood, and Damien Russo's hands catching her before everything went dark. Now she was in his world. Her throat felt dry as she whispered, "Where am I?" "Alive," a voice said. Vivian flinched. Damien stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a black shirt unbuttoned at the throat. The light from the hallway cut across his face, half shadow, half fire. He stepped in, slow and measured, like a man who owned every inch of space he entered. Two guards lingered behind him, silent and armed. "Your body went into shock," Damien said. "You've been out for almost a day." "A day," she echoed, pressing a hand to her temple. "Why am I here?" "Because you'd be dead if you weren't." His tone was simple, like he was stating the weather. "Drink." He handed her a glass of water. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his for a split second. His touch was warm, unnervingly steady. As she drank, she finally dared to look around. The room wasn't a hospital. It was a suite, polished marble floors, curtains heavy with velvet, a wall of glass overlooking the city skyline. And outside, she could see them, men in dark suits, carrying rifles, patrolling the estate grounds. "Who are you, really?" Vivian asked softly. Damien's eyes flicked to her, unreadable. "You already know." Her voice wavered. "The Mafia King." He didn't deny it. A silence stretched. Damien folded his arms, studying her like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "I need you to tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning." Vivian frowned. "About the attack. About the people who wanted to hurt you," he corrected. "Men like that don't just show up. They were looking for someone." She hesitated. "My stepmother kicked me out. I didn't have anywhere to go. I was just walking." "Don't lie to me." Her breath caught. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make her skin prickle. There was power behind every syllable, the kind that didn't need to shout. "I'm not lying," she said, meeting his gaze. For a moment, they stared at each other, her fear colliding with his control. Then, something in his expression shifted. His jaw clenched. "What's your full name?" he asked. "Vivian Green." The name seemed to strike him like a bullet. Damien turned away, walking toward a black case on the table. He opened it, revealing a collection of files, photos, and a sleek pistol resting beside them. He picked up one photo and stared at it for a moment before handing it to her. Her breath froze. It was her father, smiling, alive. The picture looked like it had been taken years ago, maybe during one of his overseas trips. "You knew him?" she whispered. "I did business with him," Damien said. "Your father wasn't a saint, but he was a man who kept his word. I respected that." He exhaled slowly. "The night he died, he was supposed to meet me." Her fingers tightened around the photo. "What?" He never showed, Damien said, voice low. They said it was an accident, but I don't believe in accidents. He pulled another photo from the file, a close-up image of a bullet casing, its brass shell marked with an engraving. Her stomach turned cold. Where did you get that? It was recovered at a warehouse fire, he said. Same engraving was found at your father's crash site. Vivian stared at the photo. The mark was a serpent coiled around a dagger, something she had seen once before, carved into a box in her father's study. Her voice shook. What does it mean? It means, Damien said, sliding the casing back into its envelope. Someone made sure your father never made it home. Vivian's pulse thundered in her ears. You think someone killed him? I don't think, Damien replied. I know. He turned, picked up the pistol from the case, and weighed it in his hand. Then, without warning, he tossed it to her. She caught it awkwardly, eyes wide. What the hell? If you're going to survive, Damien said, you'll learn to use this. Her grip trembled. I don't even know how to hold it. Then start now. He stepped closer, wrapping his hands around hers, guiding her fingers into place. His body was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the faint trace of smoke and leather. Safety off, he murmured. Finger here. Don't flinch. I'm not shooting anyone. His eyes met hers. You said that before the alley too. She swallowed hard. The gun felt heavy in her hands, cold, foreign, terrifyingly real. Again, he said. Hold it steady. Look at me. She did. For a second, the world narrowed, to the sound of rain, against the windows and his voice in her ear. Good, he said quietly. You'll need that. The door opened, breaking the moment. A man in a gray suit entered, sharp-eyed and carrying a folder. Boss, he said, nodding to Damien before glancing at Vivian with curiosity. The girl's name checks out. Vivian Green. Her father, Thomas Green, founder of Green Industries. No arrests. But there were quiet investigations into money laundering 5 years ago. Looks like someone buried the files. Vivian frowned. That's impossible. My father wasn't a criminal. The man hesitated. Maybe not. But someone wanted him to look like one. Damien's jaw tightened. What did you find about the crash? The lieutenant slid a photograph onto the desk, a mangled car. Flames consuming the frame. The seatbelt was cut after impact. Whoever did it wanted to make sure he didn't get out alive. Vivian felt the floor drop beneath her. You mean he could have survived? Damien looked at her, eyes unreadable. He didn't stand a chance. Her knees gave out. She grabbed the edge of the table, struggling to breathe. Why would anyone do this? She whispered. He wasn't involved in your world. He just wanted to keep our company running. Damien shook his head. He was in deeper than you think. Green Industries handled offshore accounts for several private clients. One of them, someone powerful, had ties to us. When your father refused to launder blood money, he signed his own death warrant. Vivian's vision blurred. And my stepmother? Damien's silence said enough. She sank into the chair, her voice breaking. They killed him and took everything. Damien poured 2 glasses of whiskey and set one in front of her. Drink, he said again. I don't drink. She obeyed this time. The liquid burned her throat, but it steadied her shaking hands. The lieutenant cleared his throat. What do you want us to do with the girl, boss? Damien's gaze didn't leave her. She stays. Vivian's head snapped up. Excuse me. You're not safe, he said. The people who came after you, they were hired. If your father's death was a message, your existence is unfinished business. So what then? She asked. I just live here until I find out who's behind this, Damien said. Yes. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. You think I can just pretend this is normal? You kill people for a living. He stepped closer, shadows cutting across his face. And yet I'm the one who saved yours. That silenced her. The air between them thickened. Too close, too charged. The lieutenant excused himself quietly, leaving them alone again. Vivian rose from her chair. Why me, Damien? You could have left me there. He studied her for a long moment. Because I've seen that look before. What look? The one people get right before they lose everything. Her throat tightened. Then you know what it feels like. I did, he said softly. Once. The vulnerability in his tone was brief, almost imperceptible, but it left her breathless. She wanted to ask more, but his expression closed again, hardening into the mask of a king used to command, not confession. Get some rest, he said, turning toward the door. This house is under lockdown. No one comes in or out without my permission. Wait, she called. Damien. He stopped, glancing back over his shoulder. What happens now? He looked at her for a long time before answering. Now, he said, we start digging. Hours passed before Vivian found herself alone again. The mansion at night was a labyrinth of whispers and shadows. Guards walked the corridors. Somewhere in the distance, she heard faint laughter, men talking in Italian. The sound of glasses clinking. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, eyes hollow, hair tangled, a bruise forming along her jaw. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something new. A pulse. A purpose. Her father's death wasn't an accident. Damien Russo knew it. And if he was right, her family, the people who threw her into the streets, had a hand in it. She pressed her palm to the glass, watching the city lights below. I'll make them pay, she whispered. A voice answered behind her. You won't have to do it alone. Vivian turned. Damien stood in the doorway again, no jacket this time. A gun holster strapped to his side. His eyes caught the light like steel. She swallowed. You're still awake? I don't sleep much. He walked closer, stopping just short of her. You shouldn't either. Not yet. She met his gaze. Why are you helping me? Because, he said, lowering his voice. Whoever ordered your father's death is one of my enemies too. The admission hung between them like smoke. Vivian's heartbeat stuttered. So this is business? He smiled faintly. It always starts that way. The wind howled outside, pushing the rain against the glass. For a moment, they stood in silence, two strangers bound by blood, violence, and something unspoken. Then Damien took a step closer, his voice low, almost dangerous. If you stay under my roof, he said, no one touches you. Not even fate. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. It drummed against the high windows of the Russo estate, turning the world outside into a blur of silver and smoke. Inside, the air was different, sharper. Something was shifting between the walls and within Vivian herself. She no longer felt like a guest. She felt like a storm waiting to break. The study was vast, lined with dark wood and shelves stacked with leather-bound ledgers. Vivian sat at the long table, her father's handwriting staring back at her. From a series of coded notes Damien's men had recovered from the Green Mansion. Each stroke of ink carried ghosts, secrets she could almost hear whispering. I used to watch him write these every night, she murmured, tracing the margin of one page. He said they were just business accounts, but he never let me near them. Damien looked up from across the table, where he was examining surveillance photos. Your father was careful, he said. Too careful. That's what got him killed. Vivian glanced at him. You think Catherine found out? She didn't need to, he said, flipping through a folder. She just had to sell him out to the right people. He slid a page toward her. It was a photocopy of a bank transfer, large. Sums funneled offshore to shell companies. But one name stood out in bold print, Marino Holdings. Vivian frowned. Who are they? The Marinos, Damien said, his voice turning colder. One of the oldest mafia families in the city. My rivals. Vivian's stomach twisted. And Catherine was sending them money? Not just money, he said. Information. Your father's business dealings. Mine. She sat back, eyes wide. She was betraying both of you. Damien nodded once. She made herself useful to my enemies. That's the only way she could have survived this long. Vivian's hands trembled as she flipped through the rest of the ledgers. The code started to make sense now. Dates, initials, hidden shipments disguised as corporate expenses. The deeper they went, the darker the truth became. She must have been planning this for months, Vivian said quietly. No, years. She waited until your father was vulnerable, Damien replied. Until he trusted the wrong people. Vivian closed her eyes. Remembering Catherine's smile the night she threw her out. And then she used his death to take everything. Damien's gaze softened, just for a moment. You don't have to face this alone. Vivian looked up at him, those steel-gray eyes meeting hers. The weight of his words heavy enough to crush her heart. Don't make promises you can't keep, she said. He didn't answer, but the silence said enough. A knock broke the moment. Lorenzo, Damien's lieutenant, stepped into the room. Boss, he said, holding a phone. You're going to want to see this. Damien took the device. His expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened as he watched the screen. Vivian leaned closer. It was a news report. The photo on the screen made her blood run cold. Olivia Green, draped in designer silk. smiling for the cameras, stood beside a tall, powerful man in a tailored suit. Damien. Her breath caught. What is that? Lorenzo cleared his throat. The press release just went out. Russo and Green families to merge through marriage. Damien Russo engaged to Olivia Green. Vivian's stomach dropped. She turned to him slowly. Tell me that's not true. Damien set the phone down, jaw tense. It's complicated. Complicated. Her voice broke into a bitter laugh. You're engaged to my stepsister. It's not what it looks like, he said sharply. The alliance was arranged months ago, before I ever knew who you were. It's business, Vivian. Business, she repeated, standing. You call marrying her business? Damien's eyes darkened. That's exactly what it is. She felt sick. Betrayed all over again. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. You knew she was part of this, she whispered. You knew her family was behind my father's death. I suspected, he admitted. But I needed proof. And you thought sleeping next to her would get you that? She snapped. The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Damien stepped closer, his voice low, dangerous. Watch your words, Vivian. I don't care if you're the Mafia king, she said. Her voice trembling, but firm. You don't get to use me as some broken little project, while you play fiancé to the woman who destroyed my life. Enough, he said, his tone cutting through the air like a blade. You think I enjoy this? You think I want to marry her? That alliance keeps half this city from turning into a bloodbath. I don't get to choose the luxury of emotion. Vivian's chest rose and fell. Then what am I to you? For the first time, he didn't have an answer. Lorenzo cleared his throat awkwardly. Boss, I'll leave you two to it. He slipped out, closing the door behind him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Vivian turned away, gripping the edge of the table, trying to steady her breathing. Her reflection stared back at her in the window. Tired, angry, unrecognizable. I won't be weak again, she muttered. Damien's voice was quiet, almost regretful. You're not weak. You just don't understand the rules yet. Then teach me, she said, spinning to face him. Teach me how to survive in your world. How to fight back. He studied her, searching her expression for hesitation. There was none. After a long pause, he nodded. Fine. But if you're going to learn, you learn my way. That night, the mansion's grand hall became a training ground. The guards had been dismissed. Only the two of them remained. Vivian barefoot on the polished marble floor. Damien standing opposite her. Sleeves rolled up, a calm menace in his eyes. Show me your stance, he said. She tried to mimic what she'd seen in movies. Feet apart. Fists up, but he sighed and moved toward her. Too wide, he murmured, adjusting her hips. And don't lock your knees. You'll lose balance. His hands guided her shoulders, firm but careful. The proximity sent a shiver through her spine. Breathe, he said. Focus on the center, not the noise. Vivian exhaled, eyes locked on him. And if the noise is you? A faint smirk tugged at his lips. Then you're in trouble. They began slowly, basic strikes, defensive blocks. She stumbled, cursed under her breath, and he corrected her each time. Her palms burned, her muscles ached, but there was a wild satisfaction in it. Every punch felt like a release of everything she'd held back. Fear, grief, rage. At one point, he caught her wrist mid-swing, twisting it behind her back. She gasped as her body collided with his chest. You hesitate, he whispered near her ear. That's how people die. Then teach me not to, she breathed. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The tension between them pulsed like electricity, something forbidden, something inevitable. Then he released her, stepping back with a sharp exhale. Again. Hours passed. Sweat clung to her skin. The bruises forming on her arms felt like proof that she was still alive. When she finally sank onto the floor, Damien handed her a towel and a bottle of water. You're improving, he said. That's your way of saying, I don't completely suck? She asked, half smiling. He chuckled softly, the first real sound of warmth she'd heard from him. Something like that. She looked at him, really looked. The man who terrified half the city sat beside her. Eyes thoughtful, hands scarred from years of violence. Why do you do it? She asked. All of this, the power, the blood, the fear. He was quiet for a long moment before answering. Because someone has to. Has to. He turned to face her. This world doesn't reward the good, Vivian. It eats them alive. The only way to survive is to become something it fears. She held his gaze, her voice low. Then maybe I should start learning. Later, when the mansion had gone silent, Vivian returned to the study alone. The ledger still lay open. The pages whispered secrets in her father's handwriting, numbers that no longer just meant money, but blood. Her family's empire had been built on corruption, and she was the only one left to tear it down. She reached for the pistol Damien had given her earlier that week. It was still cold, still heavy, but when her fingers closed around it, it didn't feel foreign anymore. She walked to the mirror. Her reflection stared back, hair loose, eyes sharp, mouth set in determination. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled across the city. Vivian raised the gun, steady this time, her finger resting gently on the trigger. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried through the room like a vow. If I'm going to survive this world, she looked herself in the eye, I'll become its queen. The city didn't sleep. Rain glistened on the black pavement like liquid glass, each passing car slicing through the fog in quick, silver flashes. Vivian walked alone, hood pulled low, every step echoing with the pulse of determination that had replaced her fear. Damien had forbidden her from leaving the mansion. Not yet, he'd said. Not until I can guarantee you won't get yourself killed. But Vivian couldn't wait for guarantees. She needed answers. And answers meant digging into her father's past. Before, Catherine had buried it under forged papers and blood money. The law office sat at the edge of downtown, a forgotten relic of her father's empire. Its gold letters, Morris and Associates, were faded, half peeled from the glass door. The receptionist was long gone for the night. The only light came from a single lamp deep inside. Vivian hesitated at the door, her fingers cold against the handle. Inside, the smell of old paper and whiskey greeted her. Miss Green. A man's voice rasped from behind a cluttered desk. You look just like your father. Vivian's breath caught. Mr. Morris? The man nodded. He was older than she remembered, his suit wrinkled, his hands trembling slightly as he poured himself another drink. I was wondering when you'd come, he said. Your father told me, if anything ever happened to him, his daughter would find her way here. Her pulse quickened. You know something about his death. He studied her, eyes sharp despite his age. I know everything about your father's death. Vivian moved closer. The sound of rain outside faded beneath his words. Your stepmother, he began, was never the grieving widow she pretended to be. She had been forging financial documents under your father's name for years. When he found out, he confronted her. But Catherine was clever. She buried him in debt fraud so deep it made him look guilty instead. Vivian felt her stomach twist. She ruined him. She didn't stop there, Morris continued. She set up a deal with the Marinos, using your father's company as a front to launder their money. When your father threatened to expose them, they silenced him. The car crash wasn't an accident, Vivian. It was The window exploded. Glass shattered across the room, and Morris's sentence ended in a spray of red. Vivian screamed, ducking as a bullet tore through the lamp beside her. Darkness swallowed the room, save for the brief, blinding flashes of gunfire. Get down. A voice roared from the doorway. Damien. He moved like a shadow, gun raised, each shot precise, cold, final. 2 men fell before they could fire again. The third escaped through the alley. Smoke filled the office. Vivian crawled to Morris, her hands trembling as she pressed against the blood. No, please, stay with me. But his eyes were already glassy, staring at the ceiling. His last whisper barely made it out. Ledger safe, under floorboards. Then he was gone. Vivian's breath came in ragged gasps. He was just trying to help me. Damien grabbed her wrist, pulling her to her feet. Move. Now. They barely made it to the car before the explosion hit. The office went up in flames, the shockwave slamming into them like a wall. Damien threw himself over her, shielding her as glass and debris rained down. When the sound finally died, only the roar of fire remained. Vivian looked back, tears streaking her soot-covered face. He died because of me. Damien turned her face toward him, his voice low but fierce. He died because Catherine made you a target. Don't ever blame yourself for her sins. The drive back to the estate was silent except for the hum of the engine and the storm outside. Vivian sat in the passenger seat, numb, her mind replaying the scene over and over. The shattered glass, the blood, the way Morris's body went limp before he could finish his sentence. Finally, she whispered, I found him, Damien. He had proof. Catherine was laundering money for the Marinos. He said my father's death wasn't an accident. Damien's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I know. You knew? I suspected. But suspicion doesn't mean anything without evidence. She turned toward him, anger flaring through the grief. Then why didn't you tell me? His voice hardened. Because information like that gets people killed. Like Morris. Vivian stared at him, her jaw trembling. You think I care about the risk? He met her gaze for a moment, eyes dark as thunderclouds. You should. Back at the mansion, Damien led her into his study. The firelight flickered across his face, throwing sharp shadows that made him look half like a man, half like something carved from vengeance itself. You want to help? He said, pulling open a drawer. He tossed a folder onto the desk, photos, documents, maps. Then start here. Every account Catherine touched, every business your father owned. I want to know who signed off on those transfers. Vivian swallowed, nodding. I can do that. I know you can, he said. Then his voice softened. But next time you leave this house without telling me, I'll chain you to the gate. Her eyes flashed. You don't own me. His mouth curved, half amusement, half warning. No, but I might be the only thing keeping you alive. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Vivian sat hunched over the desk, studying ledgers and bank statements, tracing Catherine's signature through a maze of fake companies. Damien watched her from across the room, a glass of whiskey in hand. For the first time, he saw something of himself in her. The same fire. The same need to bury the past by setting it ablaze. Why are you helping me? She asked without looking up. He leaned against the wall, eyes distant. Because I've been where you are. Vivian finally glanced up. What do you mean? Damien's jaw tightened. Years ago, someone I trusted sold me out to the Fioris, a rival family. My men were slaughtered. My fiancée was among them. Her breath caught. You were engaged? I was. His voice was quiet now. She thought she could make peace between the families. Instead, they used her as leverage. When I refused to bow, they made me watch her die. Vivian's throat ached. I'm sorry. He met her gaze, eyes unreadable. Don't be. I buried her with the rest of them. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick with unspoken understanding. Two people shaped by betrayal, haunted by ghosts that refused to stay buried. Outside, thunder rolled again, echoing through the mansion's stone halls. Vivian closed the final ledger, rubbing her temples. Catherine's trail runs through offshore accounts and shell companies. Exactly like Morris said, but every route ends the same way, the Marinos. Damien nodded slowly. Then that's where we start. She frowned. You mean, go after them? I mean burn them to ash, he said, pouring another drink. Every man who touched your father's name will answer for it. His calm certainty should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like safety, the kind that could destroy you if you weren't careful. She stood, stretching, her reflection flickering in the window. The city glowed below them, gold and crimson lights bleeding through the rain. You're quiet, he said. I'm thinking, she murmured. About what? She looked at him, her expression unreadable. How power feels less like a choice and more like a hunger. A faint smirk crossed his lips. Careful, Carmia. Once you taste it, there's no going back. I already know, she said. Later that night, after Damien had gone to take a call, Vivian lingered in the study. The documents were spread out like a battlefield of ink and lies. Her eyes drifted to the television across the room, still muted. A flash of color caught her attention. She turned up the volume. Breaking news. Billionaire Mafia heir Damien Russo announces engagement to Olivia Green, heiress of the Green Corporation. The anchor's voice faded as the image filled the screen, Olivia's perfect smile. Her hand on Damien's arm, the ring glittering like a weapon. Vivian's breath froze. The world seemed to tilt. There it was. Her father's murderer's daughter, and the man who'd saved her life, bound together in the city's most powerful alliance. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the desk until her knuckles went white. So it's true, she whispered. He really chose her. But as the flames of fury rose behind her eyes, another thought burned brighter, cold, sharp, and dangerous. Then I'll make sure this wedding never happens. The night glimmered like sin wrapped in silk. The Russo Green engagement gala sprawled across the Grand Aurelio Hotel, its chandeliers dripping with gold light, every glass of champagne bubbling with hypocrisy. The city's elite moved through the ballroom like vultures dressed in diamonds, politicians, moguls, and criminals pretending to be gentlemen. And through it all, unseen among them, walked Vivian Green. Her disguise was simple but effective: raven black wig, crimson lips, a backless gown borrowed from Damien's wardrobe mistress. She looked like a stranger even to herself. Each step she took was measured, her pulse steady, her eyes cold. The orchestra swelled as the double doors opened, revealing the evening's queen, Olivia Green. Shimmering in white satin, her smile the color of poison. Beside her stood Damien Rousseau, the Mafia king himself, every inch composed. Yet his eyes betrayed something colder than indifference. Duty, disgust, conflict. Vivian's heart twisted, but she forced herself to breathe. You're not here for him. You're here for justice. She slipped through the crowd, head bowed just enough to go unnoticed. The ballroom was a maze of deceit, but she'd memorized every exit, every guard post. She found her chance near the far corner, Catherine Green, glass of champagne in hand, whispering to a group of old men near the terrace. Vivian edged closer, her phone recording discreetly from her clutch. Catherine's laughter was soft, elegant, lethal. You should have seen the look on his face when the brakes failed, she said, her tone laced with pride. All that money, all that loyalty, wasted on morals. He never knew I'd hired Marino's men to finish the job. The men chuckled darkly. And the daughter? Catherine waved her manicured hand. The girl was supposed to disappear. I paid extra to keep her quiet. But apparently, the streets have a way of recycling trash. Vivian's chest constricted. Her father's death, her own kidnapping, all of it, Catherine's doing. She pressed closer, barely breathing. Now look at me, Catherine went on, voice low and triumphant. Soon to be mother-in-law to the Mafia king himself. Once Olivia's married to Rousseau, no one will ever touch our family again. Vivian's fingers trembled around her phone. She had the proof. She had them. But then, the glint of movement. A bodyguard's eyes narrowed in her direction. Hey! His shout cut through the music. Vivian turned, panic shooting through her veins. She bolted through the ballroom, heels clicking, clutch tight in hand. Guests gasped as she pushed past them. The orchestra screeched to a stop, confusion rising. Stop that woman! Someone yelled. Olivia's voice sliced through the chaos. Vivian! Every head turned. The crowd parted like a tide. And there she was, exposed under the chandeliers. Her disguise half fallen, the world holding its breath. Catherine's face went pale, then hardened into fury. You again. I told them to make sure you never showed your face in this city. Vivian straightened, breathless but unbroken. Guess your money didn't buy competence. Olivia stepped forward, her smile cruel. You really have no shame, do you? Crashing your ex, Holmes' engagement party? What are you even wearing? Hand-me-downs from your savior. Murmurs rippled through the guests. Cameras turned. Olivia tilted her head, savoring the attention. Tell me, dear sister, she purred. What's it like living off the scraps of my fiancé? Do you beg him for affection the same way you begged my mother for mercy? Vivian's nails dug into her palm until blood welled beneath them. At least I didn't sell my soul for power. Olivia's laughter was shrill, delighted. No, you just sold your body. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Damien's expression darkened instantly. Enough, he said, his voice slicing through the noise. But Olivia ignored him. Go on, she taunted. Tell everyone how Damien took pity on the poor orphan girl. How he kept you as his little project. Maybe they'll even believe it's love. Vivian trembled, her throat burning. She wanted to scream, to tear the diamond necklace off Olivia's throat and show the world what monsters they were. But before she could move, Olivia reached out and yanked the clutch from Vivian's hand. What's this? Olivia sneered, opening it. The phone tumbled out. The audio was still recording, and from the speaker came Catherine's unmistakable voice. You should have seen the look on his face when the brakes failed. The room froze. Every sound, every whisper, vanished into stunned silence. Catherine lunged. Turn that off. But it was too late. Guests were staring, gasping, realizing what they'd just heard. Cameras flashed. Olivia's hand shook as she tried to crush the phone under her heel. Guards! Catherine screamed. Get her out of here. Vivian barely saw the first man coming. A security brute twice her size. He grabbed her arm, twisting, but before he could drag her away, a gunshot cracked through the air. The man dropped, and Damien stood between them, smoke curling from the barrel of his gun. "Touch her again," he said quietly, "and I'll put the next one between your eyes." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Catherine stumbled back, Olivia's face blanching with shock. Vivian stared at him, unable to breathe. "Damien." He grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the exit. "We're leaving." Outside, rain was falling again, sharp, cold, relentless. Damien's black car waited at the curb, engine still running. He shoved the door open for her, his jaw tight, his voice a low growl. "What the hell were you thinking?" Vivian's heart still pounded in her chest. "I was thinking that someone needed to expose them. You could have been killed." "I've already been killed," she snapped. "The night they murdered my father, they buried me with him. You just happened to dig me out." For a moment, there was only the sound of rain hitting metal. Damien looked at her, really looked, and his anger flickered into something deeper. Pain, fear, desire. He reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "You shouldn't have had to do that alone." Vivian swallowed hard. "I'm not your responsibility, Damien." He stepped closer. "No, but you're under my protection." Her breath hitched. "And where does your fiancé fit into that?" His jaw tightened. "That marriage is a deal. Nothing more. Tell that to the world," she said bitterly. "They all saw you standing beside her." "I was standing beside a lie," he said. "One that ends tonight." Lightning split the sky. The space between them grew heavy. Thunder outside, tension within. Vivian's pulse thudded against her throat as he moved closer. His voice low, dangerous. "You walked into a den of wolves, Vivian. You nearly got yourself devoured." Her lips parted. "Maybe I wanted to see what it felt like. To stop being prey." He exhaled, the sound half a growl. "You don't even know what you're playing with." "Then teach me." The words slipped out before she could stop them. A challenge, a confession, and a dare all at once. Damien's gaze darkened. His hand brushed her jaw, slow, deliberate. "Be careful what you ask for." "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. "Maybe not," he murmured, voice barely audible. "But you should be." For a heartbeat, they were inches apart. The air between them thick with danger and something that burned hotter than fire. Her pulse raced. His breath ghosted her lips. And then, he stepped back. "Get some rest," he said roughly. "We'll deal with Catherine tomorrow." Vivian stood frozen, rain still dripping from her hair, watching him walk away into the shadows of the estate. Later that night, she sat by her window, staring out at the storm. The city lights shimmered below like constellations in a sea of darkness. Somewhere out there, Catherine and Olivia were scrambling to cover their scandal, destroying evidence, spinning new lies. But it didn't matter anymore. Vivian had the recording backed up. The truth was safe. And the fire inside her, that couldn't be erased. She thought of Olivia's face, that smug smile. The way she'd called her a street rat in front of everyone. The humiliation still burned, but beneath it was something sharper, resolve. She picked up the gun Damien had given her. The weight familiar now, almost comforting. Her reflection in the window stared back, eyes harder, shoulders straighter, lips curved into a promise. "You'll see me again, Olivia," she whispered. "And when you do." She loaded a single bullet, the sound echoing like thunder in the empty room. "I'll be wearing your crown." The first rule Damien taught her was silence. "Power isn't in what you say," he'd told her. Voice low, the glint of his gun catching the morning light. "It's in what you make them believe you're capable of." Vivian listened, and she learned. The Russo estate became her cage and her classroom. The marble halls that once intimidated her now echoed, with the sharp click of her heels. Every morning began with gunfire at the private range. Every night ended in whispers of business deals, coded threats, and quiet victories. Vivian absorbed it all, the art of reading faces, the calculation behind every handshake, the subtle shift of power hidden in a smile. Damien didn't go easy on her. He never did. He made her strip and reassemble a gun blindfolded. He made her study criminal ledgers until her eyes burned. He made her attend underground meetings, silent and observant, until she could name every man's weakness by the way he held his glass. At first, it was survival. Then, it became something else, hunger. One evening, Damien stood behind her at the shooting range, his hands guiding hers as she aimed. "Breathe," he murmured against her ear. "You're still thinking like prey." She exhaled slowly, forcing her heartbeat to steady. "And what should I think like?" He adjusted her grip. "Like a queen. They only kneel when you make them." The shot rang out. The bullet split the center of the target cleanly. Vivian smiled for the first time in days. Like that. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. You're learning. Outside the training room, the lessons continued. Damien began taking her to meetings, the kind whispered about in back alleys and penthouses. The world he ruled wasn't built on gold or blood, but on favors and fear. At first, she stood behind him, silent. Then she began to speak, subtle observations, calculated remarks, suggestions that made men listen. Green Corp's stock dropped again, she said one evening, scrolling through her father's old company reports. Olivia's too busy planning her wedding to notice her CFO's been embezzling. Damien looked up from his desk, intrigued. And what do you suggest? Vivian's eyes gleamed. We buy out their failing assets. Quietly. Through a front company. By the time they realize what's happening, they'll already belong to me. He leaned back, studying her with something like pride or warning. That's ruthless. That's survival, she said, her tone like steel. You taught me that. And so it began. With Damien's silent backing, Vivian built her empire in the shadows. Shell companies, silent partners, anonymous transactions. The same network her father once trusted became her weapon. For months, she moved like a ghost, dismantling the Greens piece by piece, until the foundation of their empire trembled. Catherine's accounts bled money she couldn't trace. Olivia's luxury suppliers mysteriously withdrew. Green Corp's reputation turned from respected to radioactive overnight, and no one suspected the broken girl they discarded was pulling the strings. But with every victory came new tension. Damien watched her differently now, not as the wounded girl he'd rescued, but as a force rising beside him. They trained together, plotted together, fought together, and sometimes, when the silence between them grew too heavy, they simply stared, like two storms circling the same horizon. One night, after a meeting that ended in blood and silence, Vivian followed Damien into his study. The air smelled of gunpowder and rain. He was pouring himself a drink, sleeves rolled up, the veins in his forearms streaked with faint bruises. You shouldn't have gone there alone, he said. Not turning, Vivian crossed the room. You were busy. I was protecting you. I don't need protection anymore. He looked at her then, really looked. You think because you've learned to shoot and lie, you're untouchable? I think because I've survived, I deserve to stop hiding. Something flickered in his eyes. Pride, fear, desire, all of it tangled in a heartbeat. You sound like me, he said softly. Maybe that's what scares you. She was close now, close enough to feel the heat from his skin, to see the exhaustion carved into his expression. She lifted her hand, brushing a streak of blood from his knuckles with her thumb. You bleed too, she whispered. You're not untouchable either. His jaw tightened. Vivian. But when he said her name, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like surrender. He did. And the sound broke something open between them. For one dangerous moment, he leaned in. Their breaths mingled, heavy, uneven, charged with everything they'd refused to say. Her hand slid up to his chest, feeling his heartbeat under her palm. Then, he pulled away. Don't, he said, voice rough. Not unless you're ready to lose everything. Vivian's throat tightened. I already did. For the next few days, they barely spoke. She buried herself in work, manipulating stocks, laundering money, rebuilding her father's lost legacy under a new name, V. Aurelia Holdings. The name spread quietly through the city's underworld, whispered with curiosity and fear. No one knew who owned it. Not yet. But Damien knew. He always knew. You're moving faster than I expected, he said one morning, watching her from across the table. She didn't look up from her laptop. You said I needed to think like a queen. And queens make enemies. Vivian's lips curved faintly. Good. Then I'm doing it right. That night, Damien found her on the terrace, standing beneath the stars. Her transformation was almost complete. The scared, trembling girl who'd once hidden behind him was gone. What stood before him now was a woman forged in fire and vengeance. You've changed, he said quietly. She turned, the wind catching her hair. You make it sound like a bad thing. It's not. He paused. But it's dangerous. For who? His silence was answer enough. For the first time, Damien looked unsure. The man who ruled an empire with iron fists and cold eyes. Undone by the woman he'd helped create. Vivian, he said finally, I don't know what this is anymore. She stepped closer, her voice steady. It's evolution. You saved me once. Now I'm saving myself. He reached for her, fingers brushing her wrist, then stopped himself, as if remembering who he was, who they were. Whatever happens next, he said, his tone low. Don't lose the part of you that still feels. She met his gaze, unflinching. Feelings are a luxury, Damien. I'm done being poor. In the days that followed, she worked in shadows sharper than ever. The empire she was building now had teeth. Bankers answered her calls without names. Men who once ignored her father's legacy now begged for her attention. But her endgame wasn't money. It was ruin. Catherine and Olivia were preparing their wedding, an extravagant spectacle meant to cement their alliance with the Russos. Vivian watched from afar, calm, calculating, unstoppable. Damien tried to convince her to stay out of it. Let me handle it, he said. You've done enough damage. But Vivian only smiled. A cold, queenly smile that made even him falter. You said it yourself. Queens make enemies. That night, as rain whispered against the glass, she stood before the mirror, fastening the same ruby pendant she'd worn the night her father died. Her reflection stared back, fierce, elegant, untouchable. In the reflection, Damien appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. You're planning something, he said softly. Vivian met his gaze through the glass. I'm planning justice. His expression darkened. That's what I once called it too, before it became something else. She turned to face him. And what did it become? He hesitated. Addiction. Vivian stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. Then maybe it's time I got addicted too. Damien's breath caught. His hands twitched, wanting to touch her, to stop her, but he didn't. Because deep down, he knew he couldn't. She was beyond saving now. She didn't need to be. By dawn, her plan was set. The green wedding would be her stage. The empire they'd built on blood and lies would crumble before their guests. And Olivia, radiant in her stolen crown, would fall hardest of all. Vivian loaded a single round into her pistol, her eyes hard with purpose. They wanted a show, she murmured, holstering the weapon. I'll give them one. From the doorway, Damien's voice was quiet, almost reverent. Vivian. She looked back at him. The girl who once needed saving, now untouchable. If you stay under my roof, no one touches you, he said, echoing the promise he'd made the night he saved her. Not even fate. Her lips curved into something halfway between a smile and a declaration. I'm not staying under your roof anymore, she said. I'm building my own. And as she walked away, the light caught the edge of her pendant, crimson, glinting like a drop of blood. The girl was gone. Only the queen remained. The cathedral smelled of roses and sin. Gold light streamed through stained glass, washing over white marble and silk-draped pews. Every seat was filled with power, Mafia dons, business magnates, and politicians who smiled behind masks of civility. At the altar, Olivia Green stood glowing in her designer gown, her diamond crown catching the light like shattered glass. Beside her, Damien Russo looked carved from ice, his expression unreadable, his jaw locked as if he were at his own funeral. And in the front row, Catherine Green sat draped in jewels, her lips curling into a victorious smile. The Greens had finally conquered the Mafia king. Or so they thought. The organ thundered. The ceremony began. Priests murmured blessings neither of them believed in. Cameras flashed. The audience whispered about legacy, alliances, power. Catherine reached for a glass of champagne, whispering to a nearby guest. With this marriage, the Green Empire will rise again. My husband's little accident was the best thing that ever happened to us. The guest chuckled, but the laughter died when the cathedral doors groaned open. A gust of cold wind swept through the aisle, scattering white petals like snow. The organ faltered to a stop. Every head turned. And there, framed in the doorway, stood Vivian Green. She wasn't the frightened girl they'd once discarded. She was a vision in black silk, the gown hugging her like armor, its train whispering across the floor like smoke. Her hair shimmered under the cathedral lights, her eyes glinting like tempered steel, and in her right hand, a gun, gleaming against the dark fabric. Gasps rippled through the hall. Cameras clicked again, but this time no one smiled. Vivian walked down the aisle, each step slow, deliberate, echoing through the silence. Guards reached for their weapons, but Damien lifted a hand. No one moves, he said, voice low but lethal. Vivian's gaze locked on Catherine, then on Olivia, standing frozen at the altar, bouquet trembling. You both look surprised, Vivian said softly, her voice slicing through the hush. Didn't you invite family to the wedding? Catherine rose from her seat, fury trembling behind her mask of elegance. How dare you show your face here? Guards, I wouldn't. Vivian raised the gun. Unless you want the whole city to see what kind of monsters you really are. With that, she pressed a button on a small remote hidden in her palm. A projector flared to life across the cathedral's arched ceiling. And suddenly, the truth unfolded in light. Video clips flickered across the marble walls. Catherine at her desk, signing forged documents. Olivia meeting with hired killers in dark alleyways. Bank transfers linking Green Corp to offshore accounts. Blood money. Audio of Catherine's voice, cold and triumphant. Make sure the brakes fail. He's had his time. I'll handle the inheritance. The guests gasped. The Mafia Council, those same men, who had once toasted the Greens, turned their heads in disgust. Catherine stumbled backward, face draining of color. You little, how did you? Dad kept backups of everything, Vivian said. You should have known. He was smarter than both of you combined. Olivia threw her bouquet, voice cracking with rage. You think this changes anything? Damien's marrying me. You're nothing but the street trash he pitted. Vivian tilted her head, a dark smile curling her lips. Then why does he look at me like that? Olivia spun toward Damien, desperate. Tell her. Tell them all this is just business. For a long moment, Damien said nothing. His eyes burned into Vivian's, filled with the memory of everything they had endured together. The fire, the blood, the nights of unspoken tension. Then he turned back to the crowd. This wedding, he said, voice carrying like thunder, is over. The cathedral erupted. Gasps, shouts, chaos, men shouting into phones, security scrambling. Olivia screamed, lunging for Vivian. You ruined everything. Vivian sidestepped smoothly. Olivia's slap missed by inches. Vivian's gun didn't. She raised it, not to fire, but to aim. No, Olivia. I'm taking back everything. Behind them, the massive crystal chandelier groaned. One of Damien's men had shot the chain. The glittering structure came crashing down, shattering across the aisle. Glass rained like diamonds, and the guests fled screaming into the night. Catherine stumbled through the debris, clutching her chest. You don't know what you've done, you stupid girl. The Greens will never. There are no more Greens, Vivian hissed. Only ghosts. Damien stepped through the chaos, coat fluttering, eyes locked on Vivian. For a heartbeat, everything slowed, the world burning around them. And yet somehow, it felt like the calmest moment of her life. He reached her, hand brushing against the gun still warm in her grip. You planned all this, he said, almost in awe. I learned from the best. Their eyes met. Somewhere in the background, the cathedral caught fire, a stray spark licking up the velvet drapes. Flames roared higher, painting the stained glass in red and gold. You've destroyed an empire tonight, Damien said quietly. Vivian smiled faintly, lowering the gun. No, Damien. I built one. The roof cracked. Smoke coiled around them like a crown of ash. Catherine's screams faded into the chaos. Olivia was dragged away, still kicking, her gown torn, mascara streaking like war paint. Vivian turned to face the blaze, standing tall amid the destruction. Her black gown glowed crimson in the firelight, her crown glinting, a queen forged from betrayal and ruin. Damien's hand brushed hers, tentative but certain. If you stay under my roof, he murmured, echoing his old promise, no one touches you, not even fate. Vivian looked up at him, eyes glimmering with something between fury and love. Fate already had its turn, and as the flames devoured the cathedral, she lifted her crown in one hand, her gun in the other. The betrayed girl reborn as a queen amid the ashes of her enemies. The bells tolled outside, wedding bells turned funeral chimes. And for the first time, Vivian Green didn't flinch. She had become what they feared most. Not a victim, not a pawn, but the woman who ended their world. Smoke curled into the morning sky like the breath of a dying empire. Green Corp's towering glass. Headquarters, once the monument of her father's legacy, now displayed a new name across its polished steel. Vivian Green Holdings. The news anchors called it a hostile takeover. Vivian called it justice. From the top floor, she stood by the panoramic window in a black suit that shimmered like obsidian, her reflection a shadow against the city skyline. Her gloved hand rested on the glass, her eyes hard and distant. The woman who once trembled in the rain, abandoned and powerless, was gone. What remained was fire in heels, calm, lethal, and untouchable. Damien stepped into the office, silent as always. His presence filled the room like gravity. "It's done," he said, setting a folder on the desk. Catherine's board members turned on her. They signed over every asset in exchange for protection. Vivian smiled faintly, her lips sharp. "Protection from who?" His eyes softened just slightly. "From you." Green Corp's empire crumbled faster than anyone could have predicted. Damien's network froze Catherine's accounts, redirected her offshore assets, and exposed her fraudulent dealings to every creditor she'd ever cheated. The same debt collectors Catherine had once weaponized against. Rivals now stalked her through the marble halls of her mansion. Vivian watched the chaos unfold through security footage streaming to her laptop. Catherine screaming at lawyers. Olivia sobbing into her silk pillows. "This is what rot looks like," Damien said behind her, his voice low, almost reverent. Vivian didn't answer. She simply clicked a key. On screen, every remaining account tied to Catherine Green zeroed out. The empire collapsed with a single keystroke. Later that night, Catherine's desperate call came through on Damien's encrypted line. He handed her the phone. Vivian didn't speak. She listened. "Vivian," Catherine's voice cracked. "You don't understand what you're doing. I can give it all back. The company, the mansion, everything. You don't have to." Vivian's tone was smooth as glass. "You killed my father. You forged his will. You sold me like property. What exactly do you think you can give me that I want?" A breath, shaky, terrified. "Forgiveness. You're not a killer. You're better than this." Vivian smiled. "I used to be." She hung up. By dawn, Catherine was dragged from her mansion by the same collectors who once took lives for her debts. Her pearls snapped across the marble steps, scattering like tears she never shed. Vivian stood at the end of the driveway as they threw Catherine into the back of a black van. "Vivian, please, Vivian, I raised you." Vivian's voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos. "No, you ruined me." Catherine's screams faded as the van door slammed shut. Hours later, the Green estate was eerily silent. Curtains torn, portraits smashed, the scent of wine and ruin in the air. Vivian moved through the wreckage like a ghost reclaiming her grave. She paused at her father's study, the room Catherine had sealed off years ago. Dust coated the furniture, but his scent lingered faintly beneath it, sandalwood and ink. On his desk lay the old photo she'd hidden as a child, her father, smiling with his arm around her, the family crest shining on his ring. Her throat tightened, but no tears came. "Not anymore. Papa," she whispered. "It's over." Behind her, the floor creaked. "Don't move," a voice hissed. Vivian turned slowly. Olivia stood in the doorway. Mascara streaked down her face, a gun trembling in her hands. "So this is what you wanted?" Olivia spat. "To take everything. To play queen." Vivian met her gaze, calm and deadly. "You already had everything, Olivia. You just didn't know how to hold it. You think you're better than me?" Olivia's voice cracked, hysteria rising. "You're nothing but a kept woman. Damien's little charity case." Vivian stepped closer, one deliberate stride at a time. "You don't understand yet, do you? Stay back." Olivia shouted, hands shaking harder. "I'll do it. I'll kill you." The gun went off. A single echo split the silence. When the smoke cleared, Olivia stumbled back, eyes wide. The bullet had missed, Vivian hadn't. Vivian's own gun was steady in her hand, the barrel still smoking. Olivia collapsed, clutching her chest, disbelief etched across her face. Vivian's expression didn't waver. "You took my father," she said quietly. "I'm just taking back what's mine." Olivia's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. The light in her eyes flickered, then went out. Vivian exhaled, slow and measured. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy. Damien appeared in the doorway, his jaw tense, but his eyes unreadable. He didn't ask what happened. He simply looked at her, the blood on her hands, the crown of firelight framing her face, and said, "It's done then." Vivian nodded once. "It's done." He stepped closer, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek with the back of his gloved hand. "You've crossed a line, Vivian." "I built the line," she replied softly, "and I burned it." He almost smiled. "Then you truly are one of us." Outside, Vivian walked into the open air. The night was cold and alive with the crackle of flames. The green mansion burned behind her, devoured by the fire she'd set, a pyre for everything that once held her captive. The inferno painted her in gold and red, the crown on her head glinting like molten metal, her shadow stretching long and regal across the gravel. Damien watched from a distance, his silhouette sharp against the light. Vivian didn't look back. Not once. Every ember that felt like a heartbeat. Every crack of burning wood, a whisper of closure. The betrayed girl was gone. What remained was a queen forged from ash and vengeance. And as the first light of dawn broke through the smoke, Damien's voice carried softly behind her. "You've won, Vivian." She didn't turn around. "I didn't win," she said, her voice low, resolute. "I just ended the war." The wind rose, scattering embers into the sunrise. And the girl who had once begged for mercy walked into her new kingdom of fire. The city had changed. Or maybe it was Vivian who had. Months had passed since the night Green Mansion burned. And yet its ashes still seemed to float over the skyline like ghosts of what used to be. Now, those ashes fed something new. An empire reborn under a name that made every rival family tread carefully. The Russo Green Syndicate. 2 names. 1 reign. The Russo estate no longer felt like someone else's fortress, it felt like hers. The marble halls that once echoed with her hesitant footsteps now responded to the click of her heels with reverence. Guards bowed their heads when she passed. Men who once sneered now stepped aside. Vivian Green had become a myth whispered in backrooms and poker dens across the city. The girl who rose from betrayal and fire to wear a crown of vengeance. But for Damien Russo, she was still just Vivian. He found her on the balcony that night, overlooking the city that used to chew her up and spit her out. The moonlight kissed the edges of her dress, a sleek black silk that glimmered like sin. "You've made them all kneel," Damien said softly, leaning on the railing beside her. "Even the old families." Vivian's lips curved. "They don't kneel for me. They kneel for what I became." He smirked faintly. "And what is that exactly?" She turned her gaze to him, eyes sharp and molten. "Everything they feared I would be." Below them, the docks glowed with floodlights, the heart of their empire. Russo's men moved with military precision, shipments flowing smoother than ever. Debts cleared, enemies paid or buried. Damien studied her in silence. The woman beside him wasn't the broken girl he'd once carried out of the rain. This version of Vivian commanded storms. "You've outgrown this place," he murmured. "Even me, maybe." Vivian didn't answer immediately. Her fingers traced the edge of her wine glass, red liquid catching the light like blood and rubies. "I used to think surviving was the goal," she said finally. "That if I could just make it through one more day, I'd win." She turned to face him fully. "But surviving isn't living. Ruling is." He chuckled under his breath, the sound low and warm. "You talk like a queen." "I am one," she replied, voice steady, unapologetic. Later that night, Damien led her into the grand hall, a room she'd seen 100 times. But never like this. The lights were dimmed, the marble floor reflecting hundreds of candles that shimmered around them like fallen stars. At the center stood a single velvet box on a silver tray. "Damien," she began, suspicion flickering in her tone. He picked up the box and stepped closer, the weight of it solid between them. "I built an empire in blood," he said. "You turned it into something that breathes." She blinked, stunned. He opened the box. Inside lay a ring, simple, powerful, and edged in gold shaped like the Russo crest. But instead of the usual symbol of dominance, the crest was split, mirrored, 2 sides bound together. "Vivian Green," he said quietly, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "You taught me that power means nothing without someone strong enough to challenge it. You don't belong beside me because I love you. You belong beside me because you've earned it." He paused, then added, "Marry me, not as my queen, not as my possession, but as my equal." For a long moment, silence filled the room, thick as smoke. Vivian stared at him, the man who had saved her, tested her, fought her, and loved her in the same breath. The man who'd once been the devil in her nightmares, now kneeling before her with the most human thing she'd ever seen in his eyes. Finally, she smiled. "You taught me to survive," she said softly, taking the ring from his hand. "But I learned to rule on my own." She slid the ring onto her finger, not as a promise of obedience, but as a declaration of power. The celebration that followed wasn't a wedding. It was a coronation. Inside the Russo ballroom, the city's most dangerous men toasted to their new rulers. The music was dark and slow, violins weaving through the air like smoke. Vivian moved among them in a crimson gown. Every step calculated, every look commanding. Damien stood by her side, his arm around her waist, a quiet storm in a black suit. Together, they looked untouchable, death and desire made flesh. To the new era, someone toasted. To the queen, another whispered. Vivian raised her glass, the gold liquid catching the candlelight. To balance, she said, her smile dangerous. Because power shared is power controlled. Damien laughed softly beside her. You sound like me. No, she replied, turning her head toward him. You sound like me. Hours later, when the last guests had gone and the music had faded to silence, they stood alone on the balcony again. Below them, the city glittered like 1,000 eyes watching their every move. Damien handed her a glass of whiskey. So, Queen of Ashes, he said with a faint smile. What now? Vivian looked out at the skyline. The weight of everything she'd fought for finally sinking in. Now, she said, voice low. We build something that won't burn. He studied her for a long moment. And if it does? Her lips curved into that sharp, knowing smile. Then we'll light the match ourselves. Later, in the dim light of the study, she stood before the mirror. The reflection staring back was no longer haunted. No longer the girl begging for mercy. No longer the broken daughter of a dead man. Her crown glinted in the soft lamplight, delicate yet fierce. A gun rested loosely in her other hand, polished and steady. Behind her, Damien leaned against the doorframe, watching her with quiet reverence. You really have become something untouchable, he murmured. Vivian met her own gaze in the mirror, her eyes steady, her tone cool and lethal. Once, she said, I was the girl they betrayed. She lifted her chin, the crown catching the light, pure gold over shadow. Now, she whispered, her voice silk and steel. I'm the queen they fear. Outside, the city thundered with life, sirens, engines, laughter, sin. Inside, the queen and her king stood in silence. The empire they'd built shimmering, in the distance like a promise forged from fire and fate. The war was over. The crown was hers. And for the first time, Vivian didn't just survive her world. She owned it.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.